Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be going over the best build for Necromancer this season in Season 22. With the new item, the Morrow Guards, granting us a huge bonus damage to Bone Spears, as well as the other change with the Haunted Visions, which grants us the ability to keep up our simulacrums forever. Although they do drain our life, it's really not that big of a deal. The most important thing is actually buffing up our essence with all of the runes and with the new seasonal 22 extra Kanai's cube slot, fitting in a Relina Shadow Hook, granting us some extra damage. But those are the big changes here with this build. But it's pretty much what you guys have seen before if you guys have played a Bone Spear Necromancer, but it's definitely one of the best builds in the game. Now, there are going to be two variations, and I'll kind of get into it. They're pretty much the same in terms of the gameplay, but there are a few items that you can swap in and out depending on your position. Maybe you didn't happen to roll some of these items as good as you would like them to be. But anyways, let's go ahead and hop right into the gameplay and explain all of our skills first, and then we'll go in depth on all of the items and the itemization, and then we'll also show off kind of the variations of the build. So first off, our first skill is going to be Grim Scythe. What this allows us to go ahead and do is start generating some resource. In addition with that, it will also increase our attack speed. You'll see that it'll kind of stack up over here right next to where I have the keybind as W. You'll see that there are these little stacks. Don't worry about keeping these stacks up at like all times. It's just for when you are out of resource to go ahead and generate more resource, and the cold rune is going to be the best because it grants us extra attack speed. That doesn't just count itself, it will also be just more attack speed for our class, so it's going to work well with Bone Spear. Now this is going to be a poison build. There is an ice build, and I'll probably cover that in another video because it's going to be significantly different and it's not necessarily going to be like the best build, but it is technically going to be a good speedrun build. But the poison rune is what we're going to want, and what we're going to actually do is run the Blighted Morrow rune, which is going to make it so damage is increased by every enemy that it does pass through. So we're going to group up our enemies and try to basically have a really solid Bone Spear just melt things. I mean, the gameplay that you guys are seeing is GR 100, and we are just melting things already. But if you push up in the higher greater rifts like the 120 pluses, and depending on your gear, you might have to kind of get everything really close together, and then you'll be able to deal a massive amount of damage cycling with your convention of elements. But for the most part, it just absolutely shreds stuff. It's just a little bit more difficult on the Rift Guardian. Now, next up, Simulacrum. This is going to be our just ability that we activate at the start. It's going to give us damage reduction and a bunch of extra resource. It doesn't matter the rune because you'll gain all of them anyways, but it just helps out with extra essence because Bone Spear does cost quite a bit, and that's going to be our main source of our damage anyways. And then we have Frailty. I like the aura of Frailty. However, you can go ahead and run a different aura if you want to, but it will make you manually cast it. For the most part, most people really like the aura, just so you don't have to manage it at all. But the other one could technically be better if you are going to manage it. But keep in mind, if you do cast it manually, you're going to be needing to basically activate it at all times. Otherwise, you won't be getting that bonus from your Dainty's Binding to go ahead and have damage reduction. So just keep that in mind. It is a little bit harder to play if you select, let's say, a different curse, but it will be viable as well. But like I said, if you're lazy like me, you'll probably like Aura of Frailty. In fact, most of the top builds are still playing it because it's just so much more efficient for most players. Now, next up, we have Bone Armor. This is going to be for our damage reduction, but it also increases our damage with our Scythe of the Cycle, which is our weapon that we will be using. And you have to use this weapon. Usually I would say like whatever item that you happen to have a bad one, put it inside of the cube. But this one is a one-handed scythe. The rest are going to be two-handers. So this is going to be what we are going to be running for Bone Armor. We're running Dislocation. So what happens is when you use Bone Armor, you're going to have a duration of it. The duration gets decreased by Scythe of the Cycle every time we use it, but it's going to increase the damage of our Bone Spear. But you want to keep this up at all times if you can. You pretty much should be able to have no problem because it lasts 60 seconds and its cooldown is only 10 seconds. You don't really need cooldown reduction with this build, but it's not going to be necessarily something bad if you go ahead and throw a diamond in your helmet versus, let's say, the amethyst is what I currently have for the gameplay here, which is still considered great in the higher tiers of pushing. But yeah, this is what we're running Dislocation. It stuns the enemies, and that's going to go ahead and activate our Crispin's Sentence to go ahead and grant ourselves some extra damage. Now you can put whatever you want inside of the Kanai's Cube. You can put Crispin's Sentence, you can put the Convention of Elements, or Brig's Wrath. Any of them are fine. In fact, you don't have to run Brig's Wrath, but most people will actually enjoy it quite a bit. But yeah, that's going to go ahead and activate our Crispin's Sentence because it's going to go ahead and stun the enemies. And then we're running Blood Rush, we're running Metabolism. You can actually run a lot of different runes here. Most of them are actually quite viable, but there is potency, so you can get extra armor if you want it. But if you want extra mobility, Metabolism is great, as I'm just doing 100s here in the gameplay, and Metabolism works perfectly fine. But if you want to push like 130s plus, you're probably going to want that extra armor. But some people prefer to run it anyways just because it really helps reposition. Sometimes you really got to get out of the way of certain explosions and other, gameplay mechanics. For our passives, we're running Standalone because we're going to go ahead and have no pets. So we're going to go ahead and benefit off of all of that. Even the Simulacrums, it won't count towards the downside of Standalone. Next up, Brome Prism. This is going to go ahead and trap the enemies here. So it's going to proc our Crispins and also locks them down so you're going to be able to survive a little bit better. Next up, this is optional. You can run Serration over here, which grants extra damage to our Bone Spear, depending on how far away they are. And then we also have Overwhelming Essence to go ahead and get more damage out of our Ruinous Shadowhook. Now, there are alternatives that you can run. You can run Final Service if you want to, for a cheat death. You can also run the Spreading Malediction. This is going to go ahead and also grant us a little bit of extra bonus damage. So it's kind of depending on what you want to go ahead and play with. And then for what's inside the cube, pretty much you're going to have the Petrified Spike. It's just more damage on Bone Spear, and it does cost more essence. And then with Restless Volition, it's going to make it so you will have up to 50% damage reduction. This one, you're more likely going to have to cube as well. And don't worry about the Skeletal Mage. It has nothing to do with it. It's just 50% damage reduction. That's all that matters, as long as your essence is not full, which is pretty much most of the time. And then with Crispin's Sentence, already mentioned this before, but this one you definitely want to cube most of the time because it's harder to roll this to get 100%. But if you get it to happen to roll perfect, go ahead and equip it, totally fine as well. And then really nice Shadowhook for some extra damage based on the amount of essence that we will be having. So that's going to be it for the skills, passives, and the cube. Now let's go ahead and hop into the build with all of the rolls here. So just like most Diablo builds, this will be more generic here, but we're really looking for crit hit chance, crit hit damage, area damage, and bone spear damage. On the helm, we're looking to go ahead and have some intelligence, also getting that crit hit chance and that increased bone spear. If you see the Caldician's Despair, don't worry about that. That's just for the augments. Yours won't obviously roll with this at the start. And in terms of farming, getting these pieces of gear, the same suggestion for everyone is just basically farm as high greater rift as possible, or rifts, and just go ahead and acquire the gear. But this is also the Hadrig's Gift this season, so a lot of you guys will have instant access to it. Now for the socket, I like to have the Amethyst in the very beginning, and if your damage is high enough, go ahead and put a diamond for extra cooldown. This will let you go ahead and spam on your Blood Rush more often, as well as your Bone Armor. That's going to go ahead and stun enemies, proccing the Crispin Sentence. And then we also have the Haunted Visions. I already briefly mentioned what it did, but it makes it so the Simulacrums last forever, because that's how you're going to be dealing most of your damage anyways with the Masquerade of the Burning Carnival 6-piece set. But the poison skills deal more damage. Crit hit chance, crit hit damage is all you're really looking forward to getting. Now with the chest piece over here, pretty much just the same thing. You're looking for int, vitality, and then a damage reduction from elites, or you can get life percent, doesn't really matter here. Nothing too important with the chest. But really what it comes down to in terms of like our damage, the Simulacrums don't take any damage, and then on top of that, you're going to have some damage reduction with them with the 4-piece, and with the 6-piece, it's just massive amount of bone spear damage. There's nothing too important to mention with the build right there. But in terms of the shoulders, the important thing is to get area damage on them, and then if you want to get resource cost reduction, or if you want cooldown reduction, that's totally fine, but it's really not necessary to have either one of those, but it's totally okay with the build. For the gloves, eventually, once you get high enough Paragon, you can roll off the main stat and then go ahead and have attack speed, but crit hit chance, crit hit damage, as well as area damage is what you're really looking for on your gloves. Now for the bracers, because it's poison build, you want to go ahead and benefit off of poison, and then same thing, int, vitality, crit chance, nothing special with the bracers. Now with the belt, what you're looking for is pretty much just the same defensive stats: int, vitality, life percent, and then armor. And then for our convention of elements, crit chance, crit hit damage, area damage is ideal. If you can get those, again, you'd have to roll off basically main stat, but you can cube this if it happens to roll kind of bad. And then with the Brig's Wrath, same thing as the other previous rings: crit damage, crit hit chance, and area damage. And then this is going to be an ability that automatically activates, or you can activate it manually if you want to equip a curse, but I really like the auto curse. But basically what happens, and you'll see it in the gameplay, is it's going to go ahead and bring in a bunch of enemies, and it's going to curse them all, lining them up for that ultimate bone spear that's going to do a massive amount of damage because it does more damage based on the number of enemies that it does pass through. And it's just kind of nice to go ahead and group up all the enemies so you can get some really awesome one-shots. The thing with this build is, if you can, and it's kind of difficult to do, I'm not really doing it because this in the gameplay in the background is just going to be at 100 greater rifts. But if you really go super high up on there, what you ideally want to do is have like the elite in the back, and then you have all the smaller enemies, and you shoot the bone spear and it passes through all of the trash, and then it hits the elite in the back for a massive amount of damage. But then you also kind of want to be close enough to proc your Bane of the Trap, so you can go ahead and have the enemy slowed, and then hopefully they get hit by the Zeistone, which stuns them, and then you're going to deal massive damage due to Crispin's Sentence. But that's what Brig's Wrath does. And then nothing important on the pants, just again defensive stats, int, vitality, armor is what you're looking forward to. And same thing with the boots, just a bunch of defensive stats. But you also do want to go ahead and actually have the bone spear damage. So bone spear damage in your boots as well as your helmet. And then in our weapon over here, area damage is like the only important thing to go ahead and try to get. If you can, go ahead and get it. Another thing that's important, sometimes if you only are going to benefit off of, like, let's say like a small, like your damage rolled, let's say like 9%, and you're like, I'm going to re-roll it to get 10%. Don't actually do that. You might actually benefit off of rolling the secondary to go ahead and get more essence, because that will go ahead and actually increase your damage with the ability of the Relentless Shadow Hook. So you definitely do want the secondary plus essence on your main hand as well as your offhand if possible. Now the offhand is totally optional, but ideally if you can get Lost Time, because it has a secondary bonus where our cold skills are going to go ahead and reduce the movement speed of enemies and increase your movement speed if you can get it. It's really not that big of a deal, especially in the highest greater rift pushings. I mean, movement speed definitely does help, but don't worry too much about that. The main thing that you want to go ahead and have on it is obviously you want to have the damage, the intelligence, crit hit chance, area damage, and bone spear damage. It's hard to roll all of those, so don't worry if they don't happen to roll great in the very beginning, but that's going to go ahead and cover all of the pieces of gear. Now let's go ahead and hop right into briefly the other options that you guys can go ahead and run for other variations of the build. So if you want to go ahead, you can still play Captain Crimson's as well. I already mentioned you can go ahead and throw in a diamond as well, and then go ahead and run Captain Crimson's. If you do that, you will go ahead and actually drop the Brig's Wrath. That's the ring that's going to group them all together when you have an enemy that is cursed. But yeah, you'll have Ring Grandeur. It will kind of give you a little bit more damage, but you'll be definitely a little bit more squishy in that department. But that's another option you can go ahead and play. I already mentioned the passives, but in terms of the gems, it's pretty much going to be required to play the Zeistone of Vengeance to go ahead and have that chance to go ahead and stun the enemy. I know it does more damage when you are further away, but you really are playing this just for that stun for the Crispin huge bonus damage. And then we're running Bane of the Trap, so it slows enemies in. It's pretty much going to be in every Diablo build because it's so dang strong. And then we also are running Bane of the Stricken, as that is going to be kind of great for the Rift Guardian. But if you are doing some speed runs, go ahead and drop this. You can run something else if you would like to go ahead and do so. But that's going to go ahead and wrap up the build guide for it. But anyways, if you guys have any questions, feel free to go ahead and let me know in the comment section below. But good luck, guys, with gearing the offhand, because this thing is an absolute nightmare to go ahead and roll all of it, as getting that bone spear damage is quite rare, because there's just so many things that it could potentially roll. But anyways, thanks for tuning in, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, drop a like on it. And if you're new here and want to see more Diablo builds in the future, hit subscribe, turn on the bell, and you'll definitely see more very soon. But take care, guys, and I will catch you on the next video. And I'm signing out. Peace.